Alright, welcome back to the channel. Warhammer Man back in the studio, and today we're going to take a look at the Saga of the Squats. If you're new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team, Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, and warcry content as well. So obviously these squats go way back, and they've been gone for some time, and now they are re-emerging with a new name and a new style to them. So let's take a look at the history. The Saga of the Squats, from Space Dwarves to the Leagues of Votann. It's the 5th of April, and they're still real. The Leagues of Votann have returned, but unless you've been at this hobby for quite some time, you might find yourself wondering who these bearded starfarers are, and just where they're returning from. Join us as we stroll down memory lane. The early days. The first edition of Warhammer 40,000 was called Rogue Trader, a game chock full of fantasy standard, reimagined, and grim futuristic settings. Instead of orcs, you had space orcs. Elves became Eldar, and then aeldari. Ogres were Ogren, and so on. And then there were the space dwarves. So yeah, this was the old school first kit for the squats, and I remember this. Oh man, have they come a long way. These are like, honestly, halflings kind of mixed with dwarves, to tell you the truth. They're not like super dwarfy, but I do remember like the crazy old art and everything. This box contains 36 space dwarf mercenaries. Choice of weapons. Hard plastic kit allows a vast range of poses and modeling options. Oh man, have they come a long way. I don't actually see the date on it. 1989, yeah. These first models were clearly dwarves wielding lasguns with generous smattering of heavy weapons. Their background positioned them as miners, the descendants of human settlers who had evolved to survive on mineral-dense worlds with heavy gravity. Over the millennia, they diverged into a subspecies named squats, similar to humans in many ways, but culturally and physiologically distinct. And here we see some rhinos going to battle with some squat bikers right next to him. Squat strongholds. Autonomous mining colonies formed allied leagues with recognizable dwarf traits from Warhammer fantasy battles such as ancestor worships, facial hair, a hefty dose of grumpiness, and a knack of metalwork. A more futuristic twist was their favored mount. The leagues rode heavy bikes and trikes into battle, combining the aesthetics of Viking warriors and leather-clad biker gangs. So here we see a couple of their OG trikes. So they basically had like one-man trikes or motorbikes, whatever you want to call them. Basically like little three-wheelers with tiny little front wheels, super like choppery looking. And then we had also like one with a crew on the back with a heavy weapon. And then obviously a little banner pole. So once again, these things are old school. 1992. Man, has Warhammer come a long way since then. War on another scale. So the actual squat line in 40K was pretty limited. There was not a lot to choose from, but obviously they had epic back then as well. Which everything was just tiny, like 6mm scale, and they actually had like a pretty full line for epic. So the first major evolutionary step came in Titan Legions, a game of massive battles using tiny models at the epic scale, just 6mm. Many of the larger units from the modern game of Warhammer 40,000 have their origins here, including all those lovely Titans and Knights. It also went on and inspire modern games like Adeptus Titanicus and Aeronautica Imperialis, though these are a slightly different scale. So yeah, here we see basically some squats battling some orcs in a tiny little war. Pretty cool. So let me see what the article says, and then we'll actually like look at the picture and kind of break it down. The epic system brought with it an enduring enmity with orcs, along with loads of machines you couldn't find in the Imperium, including gyrocopters, armored dirigibles, land trains, and ludicrously massive siege weapons. And while they never produced titans, ordnance like the Cyclops, the big green tank with gargant-killing cannon on its prow, was no less deadly. the studio continued to flesh out the background, giving the leagues a distinct aesthetic, history, and style of warfare. Where else would you find biker gang, space dwarf, industrialists, piloting battle trains? So yeah, we see quite a bit here in this picture. Obviously the orcs are on the right, squats are on the left. But we see, here's a gyrocopter. You can't really see it that well because they're so tiny. But there's a gyrocopter. There we have the land train right here. It's like a bunch of basically like tanks in a train like attached together. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Then the armored dirigibles. This is this right here. It's basically like a kind of like siege tank type thing. And then we have like the heavy artillery right here. And of course the Cyclops is this just giant monstrosity right here with a huge cannon on the front. And then what did we miss? Here's like some bikers, some regular squat bros, some of the artillery bikers. Can't quite tell what's up right here. Oh, and this is a, oh man, I can't think of the name of it. It's not a blimp. They don't actually list it right here. Can't think of the name of that one. Airship? Yeah, I think that's the airship is what it was called back then. But it's basically like a giant blimp with like, it reminds me a lot of Caradron overlords. Now, obviously, they're for Age of Sigmar, like the fantasy setting. But in many ways, they're sort of like inspired by squats. Very cool, though. Definitely an old school little blast from the past. So here we see some space dwarf banners. Obviously, the art was as good as the models back then. The later years of Rogue Trader brought plenty of trikes, living ancestor psychers, and elite infantry in big round suits called exo armor. But while the second edition of Warhammer 40,000 offered stopgap rules in its grand launch box, our heroes would never receive a full codex or any more new models. So they had like some squat psychers back then, and then they had the exosuits were kind of like Terminators, sort of. They had some pretty cool overall like aesthetic to them. Again, obviously very outdated now. For a while, however, the leagues continued to evolve through the vividly colored artwork of this era. These stout warriors were shown wielding more sci-fi standard weapons, armor, and iconography. But you could still see lots of golden ancestor sigils and plenty of beards, axes, and hammers. So here we see basically like, an epic battle taking place. Little squat bro in the front right here. A couple of his buddies battling some orcs. And then we've got like some big siege tanks and everything. Pretty cool, pretty cool. The quiet years. Homo sapiens rotundus may have started life as a sci-fi restyle of fantasy dwarves. But as the setting grew, they too became more unique. A galactic power in their own right, the leagues were powerful enough to trade and negotiate with the Imperium on an even footing. In fact, Imperial commissars were forbidden from executing their soldiers, and such skilled technologists and the Adeptus Mechanicus sent tech priests to study with them, which would probably be considered tech heresy nowadays. And then nothing. They weren't officially updated for a third edition of the game, and Epic came to an end. Eventually, the great Jervis Johnson mentioned in passing that the worlds ruled by the leagues had been attacked by a Tyranid high fleet, and that was that. Not a peep for decades, both in universe and out. Still, there were hints that something was out there. And it's important, too, if you're not familiar with it, back then, the Adeptus Mechanicus were not actually their own faction, and they really didn't have any models. And then Games Workshop actually had like some special edition metal models that they released for like tech priests and a bunch of like super cool Adeptus Mechanicus stuff. But they were only available through like it was sort of like a membership like benefit program where if you spent a certain amount of money, you'd build up like points, and then you could turn in those points to receive like this set of super limited like miniatures. But at the time, there was no, rules, no models, no nothing really in the game for them. So they actually made it to the game first before the squats did. Which also makes me optimistic as to what's to come, because they basically took them from almost nothing into like, the awesome force that they are now. And the model range is just amazing. So makes me very ambitious and hopeful for what the squats will become, or the leagues. Clues and cameos. A decade after Warhammer 40,000's second edition, Battlefleet Gothic, a naval game of spacebound fleets, introduced the Demiurge, a mysterious group of void farming miners and traders, technologically advanced industrialists with a grudge against orcs. A number of Demiurge brotherhoods aligned themselves with the Tau Empire, lending their powerful ships to the aircast fleets. Were these the leagues sneaking back into the setting, or a new alien species filling a similar role? We're still not sure, but the modern edition of Necromunda brought fresh hope to the fans of the futuristic facial hair. At the end of the 10s, the Underhive skirmish game introduced 2 new characters you could add to your gang. And though their design had once again evolved, everyone knew what they were looking at. I'm not sure what they mean by the 10s. At the end of the 10s, the Underhive skirmish game. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Maybe 2010s? That must be what they're talking about. Grendel Grendelson and Ragnir Gunstein sport a host of familiar details, from a quilted armor and fancy breastplates to the magnificent facial hair and ancestral belt buckles. They are also notably still called squats, albeit unkindly by the necromundans they live amongst. So they're obviously trying to make like the term squat to be like, kind of a, I don't even know, like a not nice nickname. So, obviously they're rebranding for copyright purposes and everything, because they can't necessarily like copyright like space dwarves or squats or anything like that. So, but they're definitely making it seem like it's kind of like a, I don't know what you want to call it, like a slur, or like a, down talking someone by calling them a squat. But in all reality, I fully expect these to still be called Leagues of Votann / squats, whatever, and not make a difference. But these models are both really cool. Definitely have a little bit more of the space dwarf aesthetic to them. Obviously, the one with the mohawk kind of has like shorter hair or whatever. It looks slightly less space dwarfy, but we can definitely see the aesthetic. I know some people were kind of like wondering about the new model, saying they didn't really look like dwarves, or that they just look like space marines. I think once you see the model next to a regular size like Primaris Marine or something, it's going to be very clear that it's a squat. And then also, Games Workshop has a habit of basically showing us like the worst new model from the range. So they'll have like a bunch of awesome models, and then they'll just show us like some mediocre regular old one, and then awe you later when they show you like the full range or whatever. So that's fully what I expect here. These guys obviously look very cool. Definitely have, that squat feel to them, and I fully expect that the rest of the new stuff will as well. This shock return got folks thinking about what had happened to their kin. The leagues were no strangers to Necromunda. There were even rules for a squat miners gang back in the day. But were these the last 2 survivors of the Tyranid rampage, or were others of their kind still out there? They're back. Enter the Leagues of Votann. You can expect to see loads more information about the next step of evolution for the venerable race. And if you're going to love what's coming, the new background of the Leagues of Votann builds off the old lore in interesting ways, including how they interact with their ancestors. Old-time fans will enjoy the references and twists, while new fans will be into their funky tech, unusual appearance, and unique playstyle. So you can see the aesthetic here, pretty similar, definitely like a chunky looking guy. I mean, imagine without the armor, it's clearly a dwarf. Not sure what size bases they're on, probably a 32. But I mean, he's like as tall as the base is wide, so he's definitely got that squat look. I really like the overall aesthetic of the guns. They definitely have like bolter meets, pulse rifle, Tau kind of like look to them. And then obviously they have mentioned in the lore and everything that they had interacted with, traded technologies with, etc. with the Tau. So it makes sense that they actually would have a little bit of like a similar aesthetic. Very cool. I like it. I like where they're going with this. I like that they're coming back, obviously, as well. So the Leagues of Votann may not technically be a new faction, but they're bringing some great new dynamics to Warhammer 40,000, expanding the game and the setting. Keep your goggles on for more news about the Leagues of Votann, and sign up for the newsletter if you want to be delivered straight to your inbox. So there we have it. Pretty cool to kind of run through the timeline of them. Definitely, been around the block. And we've seen some little like hints in the lore and everything. Definitely seen a couple of the models show up from like Forge World for Necromunda was cool. It was definitely nice to see the OG like full-on squat line and models and everything as well. When you look at these, I mean, it's pretty long ago. This was like the 90s. So you got to figure about 30 years ago. For those people that weren't around back then or playing back then. This is what the models look like. So they have come a long way. And then arguably, some of Games Workshop's competitors, the models still look like this. So they are in many ways ahead of the pack. But there's definitely some people biting at their heels. So I do like these models. I'm glad that the squats are back. But obviously, after seeing these guys and then seeing the new model, one, not plural, we can tell that they're going to be pretty awesome. Definitely looking forward to seeing the full line and what they have to offer, but that they're going to be amazing. It's going to be a nice solid line. We don't know if they're going to get a full codex right away or just kind of like some temporary rules. I would imagine they're probably going to get like a limited battle box towards like the end of the year with a codex or maybe a mini codex or something, depending how full the line is, and then a few different units, but probably going to get something like that with like first access, and then later on kind of release all the kits separately. But this will be like it'll probably be a limited box like that will be like the entry into squats and Leagues of Votann, and then after that we'll see like expansion into a full range over like 2023, 2024, etc. So definitely exciting. Cool to see them back. Always liked dwarves, and they were always like the kind of comedy relief, and I feel like the squats are kind of like the same way. They have like this super technology, but also like, kind of like silly attitudes and demeanor. So let me know what you think. Are you excited for these? Are you definitely going to be playing them? Are you going to hang up the, one of your other armies and let the squats take the reins? Or are you just going to add them in, have them as like a small force? You think they'll be able to ally with the Imperium or, with Tau or something like that? Or do you think they will be completely their own faction? You think they'll get a full codex right away? Or it will be more of like a kind of a supplement to start with and then eventually develop into a full line? Definitely curious to hear everyone's opinions. I think it's exciting. I think it's cool. I'm glad they're back and the rumors are true. Definitely thought Games Workshop was trolling us with their troll, and of course that did turn out to be the case. I didn't think that Games Workshop would spend a bunch of money making like a cool trailer, getting everybody excited for squats, and then be like, haha, just kidding. It doesn't make sense. Obviously they're after making money. So if they get people hyped up about something, the last thing they want to do is make them mad and then not have something to sell them. So it's okay to troll people as long as at the end you get a bunch of sales out of it. And that's clearly what they had in mind as well. So that's going to wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed the video and you like this type of content for Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, and Warcry, all types of reactions, reviews, news, speculations, and then of course we got a bunch of tutorials for painting, modeling, magnetization, lighting, pretty much anything to do with tabletop wargaming, and then obviously show off a bunch of our commissions as they leave the painting studio. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share, and we put out daily content, so stay tuned for that as well and turn on your notifications. That's it for today, Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.